So two things that were never on my mind when I put this thing together and when I planned this evolution was, first one was, I'm not going to fall. But if I do fall, that's me, right? That's my, I'm going to pay the price because I'm the dummy who set this up and screwed up to let that happen. So I'll accept some risk to myself. But taking somebody with me was, and still is to me, the worst part of this is that I injured one of my firefighters, one of my guys, because I did something stupid.
Stay tuned. Coming up, it's part 2 of my 2-part interview with Deputy Chief John Vanatta, discussing a training exercise that went wrong and resulted in 2 firefighter injuries after falling 10 feet to the concrete. But first, let's hear from our amazing sponsor, Midwest Fire. Midwest Fire, a factory direct manufacturer. That means no middleman. You work directly with the good folks right at their factory in Laverne, Minnesota. If you want to see just how easy it is to design your own Midwest Fire truck, check out the Create a Spec tool on their website. To get started, go to MidwestFire.com and click on the Create a Spec tab at the top of the homepage. Hello and welcome to the Situation Awareness Matters Show, episode 350. I'm your host, Rich Gassaway. The purpose of this show is to improve situational awareness and decision-making for individuals and teams who work in high-risk, high-consequence, time-compressed environments with changing conditions. The SA Matters mission is simple. We want to help you see the bad things coming in time to prevent bad outcomes. Today's feature segment is sponsored by Gassaway Virtual Training. There are 33 online training programs for you to choose from. Some of the programs are live events, presented virtually, and some of them are pre-recorded programs. To learn more, visit samatters.com website and click on the Virtual Training tab. Okay, let's jump into today's feature segment and part 2 of my 2-part interview with Deputy Chief John Vanatta, discussing a training exercise that went wrong and resulted in 2 firefighter injuries after falling 10 feet onto concrete. Today's guest, Deputy Chief John Vanatta, joined the Siloam Springs Fire Department in January 2017. Deputy Chief Vanatta is the department's training officer and adjunct instructor for the Arkansas Fire Training Academy and is currently the president of the Northwest Arkansas Metro Chiefs Training Officers Association. He is also the captain and training officer of the Lincoln, Arkansas Volunteer Fire Department. His credentials include a master's degree from Eastern Michigan University, the CPSE Chief Fire Officer credential. He's a nationally registered paramedic, and prior to moving to Siloam Springs, Chief Vanatta retired from the Clinton Township Fire Rescue EMS in Michigan at the rank of battalion chief. He also served in the United States Marine Corps Reserve as an aircraft rescue and firefighting chief, attaining the rank of Master Gunnery Sergeant. In 2008 and 2009, he was deployed to Iraq and served as a military civil affairs liaison to the Iraqi Fire Service.
They come over, medic, does a refusal on me and says, we'll take you to the hospital. I'm like, I need to go, but I'll just ride with the chief. I don't want to, I don't want to take an ambulance out of service for this. I'm just going to go and they're going to do some x-rays and make sure nothing's broke. And so take me over there, the whole way over there, I'm telling the chief, hey, if you feel the need to write me up for this, because this is my fault, then I'll sign it as soon as I get back. And he's like, let's just get you taken care of. We'll worry about that later. So go over to the local hospital, go through all the COVID stuff, get taken back in the back, eventually get an x-ray, get told nothing's broken. They slap a lidocaine patch on my side and send me back to work. Meanwhile, I find out that the captain is now at the hospital. They went back and brought him over, and he was having some pain in his leg. So what that eventually turned into is they did x-rays on him, and he had a hairline fracture of his right fibula where he had landed on his foot. He was off work or light duty for about 8 weeks until that healed up. But he also had some, hip pointer, stuff like that was kind of bothering him. But he's a really fit guy. He's already back running and doing stuff. So he was very fortunate. My end result, what they told me was that, because I still feel it now. It's 3 months later, and I can still feel like if I lay down on my side, I can feel that spot. And what the doctor told me is that while I didn't break anything, I probably tore all the intercostal muscles on my ribs going all the way around the back. So it felt like it was worse than having broken ribs. I'm pretty pain tolerant, and for the first couple of weeks I was really hurting. And after that, it kind of mellowed out, but I didn't take any time off of work. I just didn't do anything crazy. I didn't wear an air pack for about a month and a half before I could get back to doing the things that I normally do. But watching that video, if the captain doesn't grab me the way he does, there's a very good chance from my trajectory that I would have landed on my head. And that changes the whole story. 12-foot fall, right on the melon, on the concrete. I don't even want to think about what that could have resulted in. And that was, so two things that were never on my mind when I put this thing together and when I planned this evolution was, first one was, I'm not going to fall. But if I do fall, that's me, right? That's my, I'm going to pay the price because I'm the dummy who set this up and screwed up to let that happen. So I'll accept some risk to myself. But taking somebody with me was, and still is to me, the worst part of this is that I injured one of my firefighters, one of my guys, because I did something stupid. And I can't live that down. He's fortunately for me, there's no grudge or anything like that. But I'm certainly, it bothers me. It really bothers me that one of the guys got hurt because I made a mistake. And I don't see how I live that down. So lots of change coming from that. So I'll give you a chance asking questions if I left anything out or didn't make it clear of what happened.
Oh, you had said earlier that you have a hook above the window that you could connect the harness to.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you didn't?
I didn't.
Nope. What, I'm going to ask why, but not from a judging point of view, from a learning point of view. If you had it there, why wouldn't you use it? Was it because the crew was confident? You were confident? What?
A combination of those things, and I didn't want the rope getting in the way. I've done that drill with the rope on the belay before. My previous department, we used to have a 4-to-1 bag that we carried just for that. That was honestly, that was kind of the next step. I've found since I switched departments that a lot of times bringing stuff from your old department and throwing it at people, kind of beat them over the head with it doesn't work very well. So what I've kind of had more success doing is have them do things the way that they would do them because they don't know any better at this point, or they don't have the equipment to do it any differently. And then bring up here's another option. Maybe if we try it this way, and it seems to get a little bit more traction that way. So the idea was do this the hard way, and then we'll come back and we'll introduce the rope bag, and we'll do it with the rope bag, and then they'll all have that aha moment, and before you know it, we'll have a rope bag on a rig. The aha moment came a little late, and now we have a rope bag being put together to go on the rig, but not the way that I intended. But having done it before with the rope on there, knowing that we didn't have it set up for doing it, I didn't want to change the realism of the drill. I felt like we're going to do this the way we do it if it happened later on today at a real fire. That was my intention. And, obviously now I've got a different attitude about it. But like I said, I've done that drill before dozens of times without an issue. And, after this happened, we have a regional training officers association that meets monthly. And I went to the training officers meeting a week after this. And I told these guys all that story, and all these other training officers who are great guys, that I respect a lot. It helped me a lot to hear them all go, man, that could have been us, because I've done that drill. I don't know how many times. We don't always use a rope when we do it. I don't get it. And actually since then, about a week ago, one of them came up to me and showed me a picture that one of his guys took while they were training. And then they put it on the department Facebook page of them doing the same drill without a rope. And he said, 6 months ago, I wouldn't have thought twice about that picture. Now all I want to do is scream, because I've told these guys about this and they know about what happened to you, and they shouldn't be doing this. And I'm going to take care of this. So from that standpoint, it's helped me mentally a lot, knowing that other guys have said, that could have been me. I might have made that same mistake. But seeing that it's still continuing to happen, even though the word's getting out a little bit, that helped me decide to do this and go on the podcast and talk about it, because it's not something I particularly enjoy admitting that I screwed up, or that I could have prevented this, which I obviously could have. But from day one with my crew, I've been very forward. And it's probably why it's not that big of a deal, why nobody's made a big deal out of it. But from day one, it's been, this was my responsibility. I'm the chief of training. I'm the guy who put together the drill. I'm the one who decided all these things. It's on me. And I think that opened up a lot of other guys to be able to say, well, I had a piece of that, or I could have done this different. I could have done that different. And I know some of the other guys who were there have beat themselves up pretty good too, but it doesn't absolve me of any responsibility. So I'm tried to be real clear on that.
Did the drill, when you were doing it that day, did you have somebody signed to be like a safety officer?
I had the battalion chief on duty was right outside the box. So he was standing there watching when they rolled me out the window. And because he wanted to be, it's kind of the way he tells it, he says, I was standing there. He says, I watched them put you out the window. I saw Dustin start to move down. He said, I turned around to go back down the stairs to be down there when you got down there so we could, talk about it. And he says, and just out of the corner of my eye, I saw something. And I turned around and said, did we just drop him? And he says, his two guys looked at him, and through their masks, you can see, eyeballs that big looking at him. And yeah. So you can see him on the video rushed out, he comes rushing outside to check on me. And again, he's another guy where he came from. He did this drill 100 times.
You had, so you'd done this Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and I'm going to assume each time had a safety officer assigned. It in the prep and the setup for the beginning of the drill, did any of the safety officers suggest or express a concern about not having a belay on the victim?
No, none of us even talked about it.
Okay.
But the first 2 days, I was really clear that we were doing it with 2 ladders for the safety reasons. And I think I said that again when they talked about doing it with 1 ladder, and they were like, no, we got this, we're good, And by the 3rd day, you know how shifts talk to each other and pass word amongst each other and, all that kind of stuff. So I was figuring that they had a pretty good idea what the drill was, and they were pretty confident of it. But also, like I said, that shift's a bunch of hard chargers. I wouldn't have I wasn't expecting this, that mistake. But when you go back and break it down later and you look at who was in, and believe me, I don't want to sound like I'm blaming anybody, because it was my responsibility. But part of my failure was not recognizing that those particular 2 guys came in the room. One of them had never done the drill before, because he had come to us already certified as a firefighter 2 through a state academy, and talking to him afterwards, he was like, yeah, I never did this before. We didn't do it down there. So,
and he never spoke up and said, I've never done this before.
No.
What he said is, we got this. Come on, I got this.
Yep.
And he's never done it before.
I mean, we're talking about, 20, 21-year-old, very motivated firefighters. That particular guy, we did, when we built our new burn building, we had a little show and tell kind of thing for the city. And that was the guy who volunteered to be the guy to do a ladder bailout in the middle of it and executed flawlessly. So here you've got guys who have demonstrated in the past that they can get very good at certain techniques, including some high level ones like that, and do them under pressure. I mean, it's not like a fire, but having the city manager and a couple hundred people standing around while you're bailing out of a window is definitely pressure, and he had handled that. So and I didn't realize he hadn't actually done that particular drill. So that, again, my fault, my responsibility to know those things.
After the incident, did you guys do any kind of a post-incident brief of the participants and talk about what happened as a group? I know, you guys were at the hospital immediately afterwards, but so maybe like next shift or something, was there a gathering of people and a debrief?
Well, we kind of waited until the captain was back from his duty. He was back on light duty after about 2-3 weeks. And we did have a brief then with the whole platoon. By the time that happened, that battalion chief had already been all over them, and they had already gone out and practiced the drill again at ground level. They've set the whole thing back up at a lower level and practiced it to get it right. They were extremely disappointed in being involved in that. They didn't like it. They wanted to fix it. They were committed to doing that, and within a week they were out there becoming experts on it. But doing it the smart way at ground level instead of on a ladder. So way we should have started it if I had to do it over again. But we have monthly officer meetings and staff meetings. And when we had those meetings, I sat in on each of those meetings across all 3 shifts. And, and we just kind of do the round robin thing. Anybody got anything to offer? And I just made a point to bring that up and make the point that it was my responsibility as a training officer to make sure that happened safely, and it didn't. So that's on me, that we were going to change some things. Wrote up a lot of what you see on the firefighter near miss is the report I wrote internally to talk about, where we screwed up and where we can change things and make them safer. And I shared that around and asked for input on that. And we're still doing some of that. We're still evaluating some of the things that we can do differently. COVID's kind of thrown a wrench in getting groups together and having committee meetings and stuff like that. So we've got a training committee that is going to meet again in a couple weeks here. And that's one of the things on my agenda, is to talk about kind of that change of pace of how we're going to handle this in the future, how we're going to go about doing things, the crawl, walk, run, and just slow things down. We've gotten complacent a little bit and tried to rush through too many things just because of, call volume and people being busy. And we just need to slow down a little.
So what are some of your lessons learned and advice that you would have for others about setting up and doing this drill, and how to manage the confidence level of crews who might appear to be well-versed, but you find out, like in this case, someone hadn't done it before, which I'm sure you're thinking after the fact, that'd have been a handy piece of information.
Yeah, sure.
So what are some of the takeaways and advice that you'd have for others?
Well, I think the first one is start out a little slower. Thinking back on it, if I wouldn't have been in such a rush, if I wouldn't have been wanting to challenge them so quickly, it would have been, hey guys, let's go out here and on the first floor, practice putting somebody out on a ladder. We've got a little shorty ladder we can practice that on. Just practice that transition of moving somebody out a window onto a ladder and how the body should be positioned and how the guy on the ladder should be positioned. We should have covered that and probably done that at ground level, and just like maybe just gear without air packs, and then transition to go into air packs before we ever got up on to the second floor. Obviously, we will not be doing a similar drill to that again without a rope belay. That's definite thing that we've talked about, that no matter how safe we think we are, sometimes bad things happen. You just don't account for them. So better to be safe than sorry. Run the rope. If there had been a rope on me, Dustin would have never got hurt. And even if they would have let it slide through their hands, it probably would have slowed me down enough that maybe I wouldn't have been as injured as I was. So, kind of feel like we got away with one. This was kind of a heads up, like this could have been a lot worse, but it wasn't. So fix your problem. So that's part of it. Another one to me was don't change the drill. You know, when you spend that much time as a training officer putting together a drill and have in mind what you're going to do, and then the guys want to change it up, well, we can change it up, but let's do it this way first. We're going to do it the original way we planned for. And then before we go and start modifying it, we're going to take a step back and look at, you know, how can this thing go wrong? What safety did we have for the first one that's not going to apply to the second one, or that we should add to it? So that's another thing. So breaking it down, kind of a crawl, walk, run attitude. The hard thing for that is just, you don't want to beat guys over the head. You know, guys don't respond to that. They want to be challenged. They want to do hard things. And maybe that crawl, walk, run doesn't turn into 2 hours looking at a PowerPoint and then 2 hours of being out there doing this. Maybe it's just like, go over it in the classroom real quick, go out there, let everybody try it once in basic gear. And by 2.5 hours, everybody's coming down the ladder. But we have a tendency to kind of like, once we decide to do that crawl, walk, run, each one of those gets elongated way out, instead of turning into, we're going to spend 15 minutes talking about, then we're going to spend half an hour doing it at a lower level. And if everybody gets it, then we'll bump up. We jumped right into full on. And even at that, it wasn't the drill that I thought it was going to be, because my smoke machine quit on me halfway through. So the crew that was working in there didn't even have to deal with that. They had good visibility. They could see. It wasn't a hot day or anything like that. But, you know, it was obvious once I'm laying on the ladder like a turtle, it's obvious that, you know, these guys didn't know the proper way to put somebody out of a window, or they were so taxed physically. And these are two guys in good shape. So I want to make that clear, that they just couldn't hold on, or they were just desperate to get it over with. And looking from what I felt to what I see on the video isn't exactly the same. I do realize after watching the video that they still had hands on me until the captain started to move down the ladder. But at the time, it felt like I was just out there on my own, and I didn't have anywhere. So there's some lessons there that we're taking to heart and we're going to move forward with. And you know, the other side of that was share the story so other people hear it. Perhaps keep somebody else from making the same mistakes. I've been doing this a long time. I mean, I'm coming up on 30 years. Been training officer for almost 4 here. You know, I'd like to think that I kind of knew what I was doing, and I just demonstrated that I screwed up. So it really brings you down. I don't want to say it doesn't crush my confidence or anything like that, but it took me down a notch, made me realize I wasn't as smart as I thought I was. That I need to open my eyes a little bit more, pay a little closer attention to what's going on. And the other thought that crossed my mind is, maybe I don't need to be the dummy. If I'm supposed to teach them how to do something, then I have to be able to correct things. And in the position I was in, I couldn't correct anything. I was just laying there. So I need to, you know, as hard as it is for me to put somebody else in that position, and maybe it's not that big of a deal because you put a rope on them now. But to me, I didn't want to put somebody else in that position. So that left them without somebody to say, stop, stop, stop. You're not doing this right, you know, and correct it before it got to the point that it did.
I got a couple of questions that are just kind of burning in my mind here. If you were not the victim, but somebody else was the victim, you had said earlier when your mindset was, when you were the victim, that you would accept that level of risk to be the victim without a belay. Mm-hmm. If someone else was the victim and you were overseeing this as, say, the incident commander or the safety officer or as the master drill instructor, do you think you would have had the same tolerance to risk if someone else was the victim?
I don't, and I'm pretty comfortable in my mind with the idea that if it would have been somebody else, I wouldn't have let them go with one ladder. I might have been comfortable with them doing 2 ladders because I was pretty comfortable with 2 ladders. But I don't think that I ever would have let them go with 1 ladder without a belay or at least practicing it under my supervision or something. So yeah, I mean, that's another thing is what level of risk are you ready to take for yourself that you wouldn't allow for somebody else? And if and if you wouldn't allow for somebody else, why are you that stupid to do it yourself?
Sometimes we get a little close to the scenario, and we either miss or dismiss that level of risk when we're involved firsthand. Where if we stepped back, and it's always easier after the fact to say, well, if I'd have stepped back and saw it, I would have done things very differently. But that's the hindsight that everyone wishes they had as foresight. So I was just curious as to how you would assess risk if someone else were playing the role of the victim, and you answered that. The next question that I had is, what prevented you, if you can think, because this incident really isn't that old, and that's what I like about this interview is, sometimes my near miss interviews are years old. This one is only months old. If you could remember, what do you think prevented you when they said, well, we want to do it with one ladder instead of two, that you would say, okay, but not yet?
Yeah. I guess it was just a matter of confidence in those guys, and not just confidence in them, knowing them like I thought I did, thinking that, they wouldn't say that unless they could handle it. But also from the standpoint of not wanting to take away that confidence. Like I said, young department, somewhat inexperienced, but trying to be very aggressive. And in the past history, if you go back a few years, the aggressiveness wasn't necessarily there. And, there was a transitional attack was kind of a thing. They used to run single person engines, and the EMS took priority. And in the last 4 years, we've gone to a more company based concept. But some of those old habits of showing up with one guy on an engine and throwing water through the window for some people still feel like the go-to. So we've tried very hard to push the aggressive, get in there and put the fire out. We only got 12 guys. You're going to get one line. And if the first line doesn't do it, we're probably going defensive, just because that's all we've got. Get in, knock it down, get your search. And if we can't handle it, at least the search is done and we know nobody's in there, and we'll go defensive if we have to. So trying to breed that aggressiveness into people is definitely something that has been on my mind through everything that we've done. It's one of the reasons why we try to train so realistically. And we have seen issues in the past with guys kind of like going through the motions, like it's still training, and going, no, we need to move faster. You need to hustle and stuff like that. So I think partially I was hesitant to slow down that confidence, because I want to breed that confidence so that when they pull up at a fire scene, they don't feel like they got to hit it from the outside before they get in the door. There's times for that. And I mean, I think we're all on board with, there's a time and a place for hitting it from the outside, but at the same time, I don't want them to hesitate on that fire that they need to be inside. And the more I think you shoot people down, the more it hurts their confidence. And it's a fine line. And I'm not saying that, if I would have said no, that would have, even crossed their mind. But in my mind, inhibiting that aggressiveness is definitely something that I've been paranoid about on the training ground, trying in every way to promote that aggressiveness.
Sure. So you've been in the business for heading toward 3 decades, and spent a career also in the Marine Corps Reserve, and achieved Master Gunnery Sergeant rank. So all of that puts me in the frame of the mind that you're not necessarily somebody who's overly concerned about your popularity versus the effectiveness of doing your job. Was that in play here at all? If I make them crawl before we walk and before we run, when they want to run from the beginning, they might not like me as much as the new training officer coming in. This is a 2-part question. That's part one. Part two would be, what would you say to that training officer who's only been in the fire service for 7 years total, and all of a sudden now they're up at the training officer, and that like you, they don't want to inhibit the aggressiveness, but there's also this element of safety that has to come into play when people are learning how to do something. So take part one, then do part two.
So yeah. So one of the things that, it's a military thing. The standard you walk past is the new minimum standard. If you don't say anything, then you let some slide, and that's a hard thing. It's hard as a company officer. It's even harder as a chief to know when's the appropriate time to, stop somebody in the middle of something and say, hey, you're doing that wrong. You need to fix this, or why aren't you doing what you're supposed to be doing, or whatever. And it's a fine line between, holding people accountable and at the same time, not pissing them off, not getting to the point where, every time you come around, they're like looking to go the other direction. And that's definitely not what we want here. We're a small department. We're very family oriented. On the Marine Corps side, I was kind of the same way. I was never the drill instructor type. I was much more like the come on guys, we can do better type than I ever was the disciplinarian type. Not to say that there's not moments in time for that, because there are. So yeah, I mean, there is definitely a little bit of, you didn't start with these guys. You don't know these guys as well. You didn't grow up with them like you did with your, previous department. You don't want to come across like that tough guy, like you're always trying to like just show them up. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't call it popularity, but also I would say that it does play in your mind of, if you get too judgmental or too harsh on somebody, that sticks, and then they become less willing to listen to what you have to say. And so it's a fine line of accountability. I think that the culture here is one of accountability. We're usually pretty frank with each other, and tell people what, right from, like I said, half these guys started out since I've been here and have gone through an internal academy where we vet them pretty hard. And that's beat into them from the beginning is, we will hold you accountable for your actions. But, that goes both ways. We're accountable for ours too. So any mistake I made along those lines is definitely my fault. And like I said, it's something I teach in officer classes all the time, is that the hardest thing is for you to speak up when that driver is going 10 miles over the speed limit and you're not comfortable with it, because that guy's cooking your dinner and you're going back to the station. So I won't lie and say that I'm 100% always effective in, stopping something at the moment that it happens and saying no. One thing I usually do is if it's a safety thing and I see it, then yes, I'm going to step in. If it's not, it's usually a pull somebody aside afterwards and say, hey, this isn't the way we do things. You didn't have that quite down the way you need to have it. You need to work on this. And it's gotten pretty good results. The guys are learning pretty well. I think we overreached on this particular drill and come back and hit us a bit.
Thank you. My passion area is situational awareness. That there's three component parts to situational awareness: perception, seeing and hearing things happening around you; understanding, making sense out of it; and then prediction, being able to anticipate bad things before they happen. I'm curious on this drill or on other drills that you conduct. In the pre-drill preparation, before you hit the go button and folks are going to do it, was there, especially on this one, was there any discussion that you can recall about, and I'm focusing on the prediction component of situational awareness, where anyone asked the group, be it the safety officer, the incident commander, or you, before you all started, who can predict bad things that could happen from this drill before they actually did it? In other words, was there any discussion about, if we don't use a rope and we only use one ladder, this could be a consequence? The chief could get dropped.
Nope, never discussed it. Okay. I think like a lot like a lot of things, the first day we did the drill, we probably had a more in-depth safety brief than the third day we did the drill.
Okay.
And that doesn't necessarily mean that the guys on the third day didn't get the first day's safety brief, but you've done it twice, so you kind of like start to glaze over things. So it's definitely something that we could have done a better job of. And, I do feel like, everybody, I don't think anybody was afraid to say something if they saw something. I think everybody just thought it was going to be fine, and the funny thing about that is now I'm laughing about it because we have drills all the time where, a perfect example, we did a confined space drill in the tower about a month before that drill. And, we're setting up everything. We got belays, we got, ropes everywhere, got a tripod up on the top of the building, and guys are doing everything. And the battalion chief who was in command says, Chief, I got this going on. I got this going on. I got this going on. He says, but I don't have enough personnel. I've only got one backup guy, and I know it's supposed to be two, but everything's going fine right now. I said, and that's the line everybody says 5 minutes before things get wrong is everything's fine right now, but 5 minutes later it goes to crap. So what are you going to do in 5 minutes when it goes to crap? And then he looked at me and said, well, I'm going to bring that guy up from the ambulance downstairs that's waiting for a call, and I'm going to have him come up and be my extra safety guy. Good idea. So, physician, heal thyself, right? You using my own words against me, I failed to see that myself. So I honestly, I think it was just a matter, especially in my case, it was a matter of complacency, having never been heard in a drill like that before, having done that drill numerous times without a rope and just feeling comfortable with it, and being the third day of the drill, I was probably a little bit more paranoid the first day. And then as things went on the first day, and I'll tell you, there was one of the shifts that was, I think the second day that we did it. Their battalion chief pulled me aside before we went out there that day and said, Chief, I want you to know we didn't get a chance to get out here and practice. We had a couple of days of busy calls. He says, so after dinner the other night, I had everybody come down here and we all just kind of walked through some different things and we just talked about them, but we didn't do any actual hands-on practice or anything. And I said, well, I appreciate you being honest and telling me you guys didn't do it. So that day I was paranoid, and of all the days, that was the one that went the smoothest. And I was shocked.
Your guard was up.
At that day I was just just all their technique of how they were, the handoff to the ladder, changing the pack over to a harness, moving across the floor, just teamwork, lifting, everything they did was spot on that day. And they hadn't practiced it hands-on once. And the other day, those guys, I know they had practiced in the past. I know that they've done all this stuff. And just for whatever reason, whether it was the specific personnel involved who just didn't have the experience at it, if it was just a rough day, if somebody had a bad day, we just got cart before the horse, and it didn't turn out the way we wanted it to. And it's just interesting that it wasn't what you expected. The one crew does great, and you got low expectations, and then they come in and knock it out of the park. And that makes you more comfortable the next day when you're thinking, well, these guys got this. If that crew that didn't even get a chance to practice nailed this thing out of the wall, and then they come at you with, hey, we got this, Chief. We've been doing this. We've been doing that. We want to do this way. This is the way we've been practicing. Okay, good. You guys got this? Yeah, we got it. All right. Boom. Oomph. Yeah. So.
Okay. Let me ask you one last question that I ask all of the guests. Is there anything that you would want to share about this incident, or just the mindset of a training officer, anything that you would want to share that you didn't get a chance to share because I didn't ask you the right question?
Well, I think the hardest thing for me is including an appropriate level of safety with an appropriate level of realism. That is very hard because every time you throw a safety constraint in, you're taking away the realism. And I'm a huge practice like you play believer. My military experience taught me that. Everything I've done up to this point has taught me that I want them to be as stressed as possible during training, so that when they get out to the field, it'll be a lot easier. I think that, George S. Patton's, a gallon of, or a ounce of sweat is worth a gallon of blood, stuff like that. I believe that 100%. And I would rather expose them to a little bit of risk in training to avoid a lot of risk out in the field. But I think that, in this particular case, we could have mitigated that risk, not necessarily with a rope, but with having done the drill as a walkthrough and having demonstrated the individual techniques that were involved in that drill before we jumped right into the drill. So I think that there's ways to include that realism while maintaining the safety. And I think the biggest way is just to slow things down and confirm that the building blocks are all there, versus jumping right into the big one and saying, well, you guys might have to do this an hour from now. Let's just jump to it, and put them in the position of having to improvise or do something that they hadn't done in training.
There's two more takeaway lessons that you had said that I don't want to let slip by because they were so important. And one of them was that you said that you did, perhaps, and correct me if I think I heard you wrong, that your safety briefing on the very first day was perhaps a little more comprehensive than the safety briefing by the time you got to the third day. And if I heard that right, the takeaway lesson is for the instructor, or the one that's doing the briefing, to keep in mind that each time you do this briefing, it's a brand new audience who is only hearing it for the first time. You, the one giving the briefing, have maybe heard it 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, depending on how many times you do the drill. But the folks you're briefing is getting it for the very first time, and to be just to keep your vigilance up about the value of all of that pre-briefing, and not assume that the folks from the third time are going to know what the folks from the first time received as a briefing. Is that fair?
I think it is. And, and then you think about it. So if we divide it up, so we do half our shift at a time. So this would have been the 5th time I'd given that briefing. So, and now the briefing really has changed because we've changed, the drill, because we're down to 1 ladder.
Yeah.
And there were so many different points of that I could have said, no, let's just throw that ladder up. Because I had actually gotten the guy to go and get the ladder out of the box. So I had made the point of the first time it was asked, no, we're going to get another ladder, and gone to get it. So it was right there. And, I just let them talk me out of it. And, assertiveness, maybe, that's on me. I shouldn't have done that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that one of the other things is you find is that as we, no matter how many times you plan these things or do them or whatever, as a training officer, that first time you do that particular class, well, the briefing's new to you too. You're kind of trying to figure out, what the briefing needs to include. Am I being too much? Are the guys starting to get the eyes glazed? Am I losing their attention because this is going on too long? Do I really need to spend all this time doing that? So your briefing does naturally get a little bit shorter as you go along, because you're more familiar with the information. You can pass it along a little bit easier. What penetrates and what doesn't with the guys you're talking to. So I don't think that, you need to set aside 30 minutes the first day and then 30 minutes the last day necessarily, but you do have to make sure that you do a good brief and explain to the guys exactly what it is you want them to do and how you want them to do it. And, in my case, I've been much more of this is what I want, kind of a mission type order. This is what I want done. Now go do it. And sometimes I have to remind myself, and I hadn't thought of this before, but this is the problem. I'm a military guy by nature. I think in mission type orders, which is, this is what I want done. Now go do it. Well, what I need to do as a training officer is different than that. It's, this is what I want done. This is how I want you to do it. And these are the steps I need you to take, because they need to, if they haven't learned those steps, they're just going to wing it. And if they wing it, then the safety's not there. So that's certainly the case with what happened that day, I think. And I recognized that while I was in the air, that, I had screwed up, that was my fault for not building in those building blocks, and that the next time we did this or something along these lines, we would do that. And it's, like I said, it's a challenge adding the realism in. It's a challenge keeping everybody in service to go on calls. It's a challenge maintaining, when you've got a live burn building and you've got 12 guys on duty to get through training, and you've got to maintain, you can run out of people really quick if you follow 1403 to the letter. So what things do you have to follow? What things don't you follow? How do you keep the whole thing running safely while still getting the training that they need? Because the biggest thing we can do to hurt these guys is not train them at all. I mean, in my belief, the worst thing we can do is go, it's too dangerous to train, so we're not going to practice. Well, that's I'm a huge believer that the more you train, the better you get at something, the safer that thing gets. So it's a struggle to maintain those things, but and I think we usually do a pretty good job of it. I just think we overstepped our bounds. I got away from the last 2.5, 3 years of taking things slow and jumped in too deep when the guys started getting bored, and I wanted to see them progress faster. So definitely need to have a plan, need to have a kind of in your head what your end state is, as far as how long is it going to take to get there. I wanted to be there that day. And what I needed to be there in 6 months as far as that particular drill went. I needed to do it now, demonstrate the techniques, let them practice, come back, do another drill, maybe without the air packs, maybe with the safety on or something like that, and then come back 3 months later and do it again, make sure everybody retained everything. Instead, I wanted to check that box and move on to something else fun. And I think that's what they all wanted to do. And boom, we get the incident that we had, and now I get to tell everybody what a dummy I am.
Well, it takes a lot. I don't know that you're a dummy, but it takes a lot of courage to talk about events when things go bad. And one of the things I struggle with is when I do my classes and we talk about near misses in classes, I'll have people share stories like you shared in class, and I'll say, "Wow, that'd make a great podcast. Do you want to come on and be a guest?" "Oh, no, I don't want others to know." "Well, you just told a whole class, pre-COVID, you just told 100 people here in the classroom, about what happened, but they won't come on and be a guest because what they're afraid is that they will be subjected to public court or criticism or ridicule." And I told them on my feed, like on my YouTube feed, and I haven't said this in a while, so I'll say this for the benefit of everyone. On my YouTube feed and my social media feed, if someone comes onto my feed and throws hate out about my guest, the post is removed and they are blocked, because that's not what my show is about. You don't have to criticize my guest if you think what they did wasn't smart. If you can't learn from it, then go watch someone else's show and throw your criticism there. So what I focus on is people sharing the comments that they relate to what happens. But it's amazing how many people just won't step up and be a guest, and you shared this first on the near miss reporting system. So that's a self-initiated way to kind of raise your hand and say, we had something happen that others need to learn from. And for yours, as with so many guests that I have, if your circumstances were just slightly different, this outcome could have been catastrophic.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And believe me, I'm not all Mr. Altruistic either. The first time I shared this with the training officers was, "Hey, I'm going to show you this video, but I don't want to get out there." I mean, and it's not even about me personally. It's about the other guys involved in the department. I don't want to embarrass them. I don't want to embarrass the department. I don't want to embarrass the city. The city has given us the resources to do training. We've got this new burn building that looks great and gives us all these opportunities to do things. And I don't want anything negative coming back against them or the guys because we were out there trying to do something and we screwed up. It's a learning experience. And if I'm going to look at those guys and say, "Hey, that last fire you went to didn't go well. Did you try this? Did you try that? Let's talk about how we can change that," and have them know that that's coming from a place of, "I'm not blaming you. I just want you to get better. Yeah. I just want you to learn something every time you go to a fire. And every time we train, so that one day maybe that little bit of knowledge is what keeps you out of trouble or helps you save a life, or just make sure that you have a long and happy retirement. That's what I'm here for. I don't need this job financially or mentally or anything else, but I love this job. I'm very passionate about it, and it's about the guys that I work with, the firefighters, male and female, that work here and just bust their butts, especially with training. And it motivates the heck out of me to want to come to work every day and show them something new. And sometimes I show them too much, or I expect too much of them too fast. And normally that's not a problem. This time it was. So willing to take responsibility for that. Like I've said before, if it wasn't for, all I could think of is, if Phoenix wouldn't have put that video out of the guy cutting into the storage tank with the K-12 saw, or if they hadn't shared the Beck Tarver incident, or if Denver hadn't released all this stuff on Langbelt incident, we wouldn't know about those, and we wouldn't be able to avoid them. So as small as this is, the consequences are much smaller than any of those. And if they could put that out there, then why can't I put this out here? And I had the full support of the chief to go ahead and do this and talk about it. And I hope nobody comes away with the impression that this is about my ego or, me getting my name out there or anything like that. This is the job I want until I'm done. I love what I do here. I'm not looking to gain something else. All I want is to make sure that this doesn't happen to anybody else.
Yeah. Well, it's a courageous person who can raise their hand and say, something went wrong and I've got lessons to share from it. Because many would say something went wrong and either I'll blame someone else, or I'll try to cover it up, or I'll try to minimalize it, or I'll say, well, I really didn't get hurt that bad, so it's not that big a deal. They'll find all these ways to excuse it away. But courageous is the person who raises their hand and says, I want the world to know what happened, how it happened, why it happened, what I learned from it, so you don't do the same thing that we did and potentially have that catastrophic outcome. Like if that door would have been open, the extent of your injuries or the captain's injuries could have been significant. If you would have shifted and landed on your head from 12 feet onto concrete, we both know how that one would turn out. John, thank you for coming on, for being a guest with me. Thanks to the near miss reporting system for being there and capturing these stories. Thanks to John Russ, who reached out to you and to me and said, hey, here is a story that would make a great show if the chief would be interested in your. So thank you for that. And I'm absolutely sure with all my heart that you're going to prevent a similar event and potentially a catastrophic event by the lessons that you shared here today.
I hope so. That's the goal. Don't want to see any firefighter get hurt, but I want to see them train. Want to see them get out there and push the envelope as much as possible. Just don't. I guess the biggest takeaway is just don't take that safety for granted. Don't let the fact that you've done it 100 times mean that something bad couldn't happen this one time. So if that persuades somebody else to attach that rope or to say, hey, hold up a second, do we need to look at this from a safety standpoint and get somebody else to do that, then this is 100% worth it. And I'll take the 3 months of laying on my other side and all the other stuff that I had to deal with for that.
Well, thank you again, Chief.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you, Chief Vanatta, for sharing your experience with us today. Remember, this is part 2 of a 2-part interview, so if you missed part 1, you might want to go back and listen or watch to last week's program. Since 2007, SA Matters instructors have helped more than 1,200 organizations and 87,000 individuals improve high-risk decision-making, including first responders, industrial workers, military personnel, business leaders, medical professionals, utility workers, highway workers, aviation workers, oil refinery operators, and more. If you or someone you care about works in a high-risk, high-consequence decision-making environment, then we are here to help to improve their safety and survival, and to help them accomplish the most important mission of all, and that's to go home to the ones who love them. Since the start of the pandemic, I've had some amazing opportunities to present my programs on the virtual platform for groups ranging in size from 6 to 400. And just when I thought we were making the turn on the pandemic and getting back to delivering live programs, we've had a setback. All the live events scheduled for the rest of 2020 have been postponed due to increases in COVID cases nationally. On November 24th, I did jointly present a situational awareness and thermal imaging virtual program with Andy Starnes from Insight Training. It was a great evening of learning and sharing, and the feedback was amazing. Here's one piece of an email that I received from a lieutenant from the Chicago Fire Department. I participated in the webinar with Andy Starnes and yourself last night. It was spectacular, incredible. I'm simply blown away. Thank you for the outstanding presentation. Looking forward to watching it again when the recording is released. My mind was blown away. You know, it never gets old getting feedback like that from program attendees. I want to thank the organizations who've allowed me to offer your members virtual training, and a special thanks to the 44 agencies who've had programs postponed in 2020 because of the pandemic and are patiently waiting to be rescheduled. If you're interested in hosting a virtual program or a live event in 2021, just click on the Contact Us tab at the top of the SA Matters homepage and I'll give you a call. Finally, remember to check the show notes for how to subscribe to our newsletter and how to follow us on social media. There we share ideas about how to improve situational awareness, how to make better decisions under stress, and how to improve the skills of critical thinking and resilient problem solving. Well, that's it. Episode 350 of the Situational Awareness Matters show is complete. Thank you again to my guest, Deputy Chief John Vanatta. Thank you to our amazing Platinum sponsor for almost 7 years now, Midwest Fire. Thank you to our feature segment sponsor, Gasaway Virtual Training. And thank you to our associate sponsor, Chief Miller. But most importantly, thank you, the listeners and viewers of this show, for sharing some of your valuable time with me today. I certainly appreciate your support of the SA Matters mission. Be safe out there, and may the peace of the Lord and strong situational awareness be with you always.
You've been listening to the Situational Awareness Matters show with Dr. Richard Gasaway. If you're interested in learning more about situational awareness, human factors, and decision-making under stress, visit his website, samatters.com. If you're interested in booking Dr. Gasaway for a program, or if you would like to be a guest on his show, click the Contact Us tab at the top of the homepage.